In the beginning, it was a fairly contentious issue.
Nobody trusted anybody.
Nobody was working together.
We didn't really see one another's point of view very well.
You either wore a black hat or you wore a white hat on growth.
Literally, there were fist fights. It was very difficult. It was very messy.
It is very difficult. It's very complex.
People were tired of the confrontation.
Everybody has to give a little to get.
Don't expect everybody to agree up front.
We have to create common ground in some areas. We have to.
Everyone had generally the same goal.
Our concern was getting long-lasting effect.
You know, the very thing that brought people to southern Arizona was being lost.
And we had to do something.
People come to southern Arizona, Pima County and Tucson, and sink their roots, and it's just a wonderful place to live.
Everybody has a place that they call home. Everybody has a place that they're from, and for me, place is the smell of the rain on the desert. There's nothing like it.
Tucson is a very unique community. We love our mountains. We love our desert.
People really value the lifestyle that Tucson has.
We love to recreate out there, whether we're hunters or whether we're bird watchers.
There's never been any net loss in population over the last 50 years. We don't expect that to occur in the next 50 years.
Since I had moved into the area, I'd just seen all of this rapid development and growth going out in all directions, and there didn't seem to be any control over that.
You know, there used to be just a few people in a space, and all of a sudden there's a lot more, and that just means that you have to pay more attention to the end result.
And if we grow in a destructive way, all this beauty goes away.
And we've seen it. And we've seen it get away from us.
We had an elected board of supervisors that had not said no to a large rezoning since 1976.
The priority was to get this zoning, to extract as many dollars from this piece of land as possible.
We were in the throngs of growth wars.
We were losing the things that gave us a sense of place.
The very thing that brought people to southern Arizona and the very thing that kept us here was being lost, and we had to do something about it.
I first became involved in the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan planning effort when I worked for the state of Arizona.
I was asked to be a member of the science team.
I come from the development side.
They asked me to be part of the ranching team.
I was town manager for the town of Marana.
I've been in the real estate business since 1978.
My husband and I moved into the Ironwood Forest in the Tortolita Fan.
The environmental groups came to me to evaluate a proposal.
I was asked to become chair of the Ranch Conservation Technical Advisory Team.
I've been the county administrator since 1993.
I was invited to participate on the Science Technical Advisory Team.
I got the opportunity to get elected to the Board of Supervisors.
I've been in the Tucson area for about 11 years. Came here for grad school.
I am the executive director of the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection.
I'm the director of the Office of Conservation Science in Pima County, and was project director for the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan.
When I became governor, I rapidly discovered that there was a special magic in Tucson and Pima County, that it was a community full of activists, people who really understood and loved the Sonoran Desert and had this sense that their community was a special place precisely because of its relationship to the natural environment. And they were coming to understand that the Sonoran Desert, more than most ecosystems, is an incredibly fragile place, absolutely unique, but really in danger of destruction from uncontrolled growth.
And they realized that with growth and expanding human populations, that now's the time, if we're ever going to do it, to conserve these places.
The Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan got started with a conflict between the development of the northwest part of Tucson and the pygmy owl, which had been listed as an endangered species.
It really was the first time that local entities, including Pima County, had to address the issue of an endangered species within their municipalities.
The owl being put on the endangered species list is really the canary in the coal mine. And we can't just deal with owls. We've got to deal, one, with their habitat, and secondly, with the entire suite of species that are kind of coming at us in the wake of the habitat loss, which has endangered the pygmy owl.
It was what motivated the environmental community, the county government, the home building community and development community and realty community.
We had a great deal of bureaucratic concern over the single species issue and whether or not the single species issue would be something that we could even comply with, given what little we knew about the pygmy owl, what little we knew of the implications.
All through 1998, there were talks between the conservation community, the county officials, Fish and Wildlife Service, about the possibility of Pima County pursuing a habitat conservation plan.
And in the case of Pima County, the reaction was, let's explore this, let's sit down and see what we can make of it.
It seemed to me that that was a really good positive solution for what had been really kind of the negative political climate here in regard to regulation.
And we began looking at options and available and what other communities had done. And what came out of that discussion was a multi-species conservation plan, kind of trying to solve all your problems with one plan.
Only the locals can come up with a plan. The service can't do it. The locals have to make, the community has to make that decision.
And so instead of becoming one sort of land use on a long list of land uses, the pygmy owl became the organizing principle for all land use.
And I'm not confident that we would have really gotten to that next level without the listing, which kind of brought everybody up short.
Frankly, at the beginning, it just seemed like it was a huge undertaking.
My concerns were that it was very risky, and other communities that had gone through this process had instantly gone to war.
We were living in a community that hadn't said no to a large rezoning in over 25 years.
Our concern was getting long-lasting effect.
At the time, I think the environmental community was greatly underestimating the time and the money that it would take to do this right.
This is a big county. We're larger than the state of Connecticut.
I wondered, how are you going to bring environmentalists and ranchers together?
Initially, I was very naive and I thought that we would really be able to conserve the Northwest and save the pygmy owl.
I thought, because it was my pattern, to take about a month to write a study, and then I would frame the issues and off it would go, and then the board would make a decision, and then that would be solved.
My first thoughts and concerns is, how in the hell are they going to get enough members of the community together to agree to conserve large amounts of open space?
How do you get your conservation ethic fully expressed in the document that's used every day?
I think all of us were a little skeptical about it in the beginning.
My objectives with regard to the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan were to kind of see a large-scale planning effort that promotes conservation in a way that's compatible with the activities of the county.
And avoid the pitfalls of the rapid urbanization that we saw around us.
What I wanted from a developer standpoint was to better define the rules under which I would operate our business.
That the ranching community would stay viable.
That there would be some kind of a plan to address growth.
We need to be able to accommodate that population growth and grow in a location where it causes the least harm to the community and the maximum benefit.
The main thing that I was interested in was getting a good process going.
To try and preserve enough of the Sonoran Desert to maintain the biodiversity, the amazing biodiversity that we have here.
My interest is in answering the question, what are those lands going to be like in 30 years? And as management issues come up, how are we going to respond?
What I was expecting to see was that the county would take on the intent of the Endangered Species Act and work towards not only protection but recovery of species.
It would create this buffer around our community, and as a consequence, preserve and keep the metropolitan area and the city to some extent natural.
The ultimate goal, I believe, of the SDCP is to incorporate this community's love of open space with the county's need to have continued growth.
We were really just trying to get a head start on a plan and make ground where these other plans had just started too late.
I think the fundamental principle is that this is a nice place to live, and we want to keep it a nice place to live.
Anytime that you're dealing with a large-scale planning effort, there are concerns, I think, that stem from the ability to get all the parties necessary to the table and their ability to work together.
And what we failed to understand is that there is a huge level of support for the concepts and the plan that was being discussed.
There has to be community buy-in, and it's not by selling them something that was prepared by a small group of people.
The trick is to get everybody involved, make them feel like they're heard, and then be able to take that input and craft it into something that's effective.
And the beginning of our process was to basically put us all in a room together and lock the door.
This is a Scopy meeting.
And so we had over 100 people, or 120, show up and want to be on a steering committee. And so we said, well, you know, how are we going to manage that?
It was totally counterintuitive to have a huge, unwieldy, just raucous public committee.
Many of us thought that that committee was designed to fail.
So I asked, what is boot camp? And Maybeen said, well,
The county set up this series of workshops, which they refer to as boot camp for the stakeholders.
Which says basically to be an intelligent member of the community, expressing your community views and values, and you need to be educated on the issues.
Making sure that we were all starting from the same page.
So if we could just begin with the slides. One element of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan.
We figured, well, let's put about 12 on, and we'll talk for about everything from population growth to planning to water to biology to the whole range of topics. And by the time we get done, we'll only have 15 left. And it didn't work that way. By the time we got done, we still had 100 left.
I think it was a really good way to sort of get people to understand the different elements of the planning process.
When this process started, there was absolutely no love lost, there was absolutely no communication and no understanding, and there was no trust.
It was very difficult, it was very messy. It wasn't much fun for the first 3 years.
The conflicts are inevitable, but you know, they're isolated conflicts as opposed to everything being a conflict.
People were trying to get their core issues out to the rest of the group, and nobody felt like they were being heard, so they just said the same thing louder and louder and louder.
There was sort of an original standoff among the groups, and silly people smacking each other over the head with notebooks and pushing each other.
Literally, there were fist fights. Everybody pushed just to get as much, if it was the conservation community, or as little if it was the home building community, as they could. And
when you see all these warring interest groups, that does not look like the formula for a happy ending to a land use proposal.
But within each camp, certain individuals did arise out of that process that began to communicate with one another.
A few people that wanted to be productive kind of went off to a corner and made a commitment that if we came up with some policies, we were responsible for going back and selling it to our constituencies.
And I think that provided a core that other members of the steering committee formed around.
I mean, we got to know each other. We went to so many meetings that with a few limited exceptions, you just couldn't not like each other after a while.
That was done by accident, but it turned out to probably be one of the best things that ever happened because it created this sustainable support for the conservation plan.
I don't think that we could have had a Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan that has buy-in from the community unless people were part of it.
There's much to be understood about the power of the community when you let them take over the knowledge.
If you don't get the whole gamut, the whole sphere of people that care about this issue, you're not going to have a successful plan. And people don't want to do that because it's too painful.
This is not about partisan politics. It's not about vast national issues. It's about our community. And if you start looking around, you'll find lots of help, lots of possibilities at every level of government in the most surprising and really productive places.
What I'd like to do now briefly is tell you a little bit about what the Science and Technical Advisory Team has been doing.
There was a Science Technical Advisory Team known as STAT. And the primary purpose of STAT was to sort of provide the biological layer of information to the conservation plan.
To provide the county with adequate information, good, solid science, and up-to-date information so they can make decisions for natural resource management and species management that are appropriate.
And then we had a tremendous amount of input from the science community. They came forward to share decades of information.
There has been an incredible amount of information gathered by many people.
We didn't start from scratch. We had a pretty good investment in geographic information systems that helped us to do some of the analyses that otherwise would have been very costly.
We needed the sort of baseline information before we could even kick off a plan.
And what made them want to participate was the hope for a good outcome, the belief that there was a sincere interest in conserving the species.
They have tried to, from the very beginning, make sure that the science is kept separate from the political and social influences.
We put up what we call early in this process as a firewall between the politics and the science.
Allowing public input and process to formulate that science into what the plan will ultimately be.
Now, the scientists had to work in public. There could not be any closed meetings. We had to provide minutes of the meetings and have those meetings available for the public to come to so that they know what's going on.
That turned out to be a good thing too, because everyone knew everything the whole time. And when we did our peer review, we did our peer review in public.
You need to expose the work that you have to the criticisms of others. I mean, how else might you avoid pitfalls?
An open process keeps it credible, and it also allows you to make mistakes and fix them along the way, which it's inevitable, but one mistake won't sink the whole process.
When you apply fact and science and what really is worth conserving and what isn't worth conserving, that fundamental question,
then you feel like you just aren't proceeding by politics and where a sewer line was laid or anything like that. It seems like you're doing the right thing by the land and the right thing by the community.
I think the benefits of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan are far greater than just having, some protected open space on the landscape.
This process is not only very public, but it has it's kind of permeated throughout all the public entities in the county.
They've already laid the groundwork, I think, for that cooperation for future issues that come up, not just for conservation of open space.
And I think it'll also always serve as this forum for conflict resolution.
We've worked together very well, and we've come up with some solutions on issues that I didn't really think that we could.
It's a great democratic movement, in a sense, to have found a way and to wish for all your policy issues to invite in everyone who's interested.
By doing that, the plan, its concept, its vision is going to basically be perpetuated not only within the organization of local government, but I think by the citizens themselves.
I'm amazed at what I've seen the community do so far in terms of holding local government accountable for the promises that were made.
People started being more conscious decision makers about where the growth is going, how you're going to get services.
It has changed board recommendations about how to proceed in areas outside of land use.
The Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan has become an umbrella term for how we want to have a more sustainable community.
As a region, we have learned that we're going to prosper together or suffer together from the consequences of poor planning.
My experience had been that the county and other entities in Pima County looked at things on a more short-term project-by-project basis.
We tended to rifle shot the problem. And what we've learned out of the conservation plan is that there's no single solution, and that it really has to be multiple goals, multiple objectives wrapped into one overall concept or vision.
When we went to do the comprehensive plan, we did the conservation plan first, came up with the conservation land system, and then embedded it in our urban plan.
I think a model has been sent by the way that the SDCP has been put together, and that other entities in the area have looked to that planning model.
We've used it. We've pirated that kind of planning process when we talk about water resources.
The technical information that we generated for the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan is of value to other jurisdictions.
It's a savings of time, but it also allows them to make better informed decisions.
When you articulate how you expect a city or a county to grow, it provides sort of a roadmap of where you would like to see development versus where you think conservation would be more appropriate.
The fact of the matter is the SDCP helped guide growth in a beneficial way.
It's really trying to drive urban expansion or population expansion inward into areas where there are existing services.
People have had to learn that development and conservation can not only go hand in hand, it can actually improve the price point, it can be an amenity, and it can be a selling point.
If you don't like cookie cutter, one size fits all type development, you'd say it's better.
There's a real upside here, that it really is about planning both development and landscape protection, and the two merge together.
Would I recommend this to other communities? Absolutely. Has it been worth my time and effort? Well, I've gained a lot of weight and lost a lot of hair. But other than that, yeah.
Would I recommend this process to other communities? And the answer is yes, and not just for this issue.
It's important to look large scale, look big, look long term, and it's important to have input from all of the interested parties.
It takes longer, but you come up with, I mean, I hate to use cliches, but you come up with a better product.
Let everyone be involved so that everyone can go through this collective learning experience.
When you have this big picture approach, things can get lost.
Learn from our mistakes, because guaranteed there's going to be mistakes.
I highly recommend taking some criticism and getting to the other side of it to build trust.
I would advise communities who don't have a deep pool of biological talent to go and to talk to either state or regional conservation groups.
We've reached out and brought in experts from all areas of ecology, restoration efforts, to try and pick the minds of the best people in the country for what we're doing.
With all the controversy that was going on, by having a broader base, you avoid conflict.
If you have a clear picture of your end game, then you can put people in a room that have dramatically different views, and they will gradually begin to find reasonable solutions to almost every problem that you cross.
It is about the community, and my job is to get as much information to them as I can so the discussion is productive.
When you have something as emotional as the conflict between, say, growth and environment, that's important that you have this sort of a process.
I think any community that's struggling with growth and where to grow and how to grow, the SDCP process is what they ought to try and replicate.
It certainly has been a good experience and a worthwhile process.
Once the community gets started, without having to go through the slings and arrows that we went through here, I think there'll be a lot of positive reaction.
Yes, it's worth it. It's really hard, and the sooner you do it, the better. In the long run, you'll be a much better, more vibrant, more balanced, and I think economically viable community for it.
So I recommend the process, but you have to be on the other side of it to know that it works.
We have the last great opportunity to save open space in this part of the world. That's amazing, and that's powerful, and it's important, and people realize how lucky they are to be part of that process.
Without this process, we would have looked like Phoenix. We would have looked like South Central LA. And it is the one thing that may save the overall quality of life for Pima County.
We can make a living, we can develop our communities and our economy without destroying the values that have created the community in the first place.
This is very important because the only way that you protect the environment is if you have a strong economic base.
It's just that simple. The resources provide the economic base, and we can use them in a way that is in fact renewable and that guarantees a future for us, for our kids, for generations.